Harriet Tubman, live in concert. A novel by Bob the Drag Queen. I was not prepared for this book. You are not prepared for this book. But the good news is, Mrs. Pearlmania, my wife who sits just off camera here to the side, she was completely prepared because she read this book the second she heard about it. Bob the Drag Queen is one of our favorite entertainers in the history of a modern American comedy and drag and everything else. But now, Bob the Drag Queen has become one of our favorite authors, writing this incredible book about Harriet Tubman trying to bring the new sound of freedom back to America in the 21st century by hiring a hip-hop producer to release an album that is going to do the journey through the history of slavery in the United States. I'm not doing it justice, but you know who does do it justice? Mrs. P over here, as she explains to us this entire book. You don't have to have read it. That's why we do a story report, because we all go on the journey together. And with that, take it away, Mrs. P, on this special edition of
Too Many Tabs. Remember to smile.
Welcome back. Guess what? It's story report day.
It is.
It's book club day.
It is.
But we're calling it story report now because guess what? I've already read this book.
Yes.
I'm going to explain it to you. You already went through all this.
I know.
There is one thing I did want to go over. Okay, so I loved this book. And I think everybody should read it. If they have the time or energy, it's not that long of a book.
It's a very short book.
I highly recommend reading it because it was so fun.
You read it in like an afternoon.
Yeah, it's great.
You blew right through it. And also, you don't remember Libby or your library.
Libby Library. Also, I hear the audiobook is excellent, and I'll tell you why later in the book. Okay, but listen. The way that these story reports have gone historically with their new name is that I read the book and then I explain to you the whole book, right? I'm going to spoil it, guys. But the thing is about this book, I'm going to make slight changes to the verbiage, okay, when I'm explaining this book, because I think it's somewhat inappropriate for some of the words that are said in this book to come out of my mouth, right? Specifically accents and things like that. So I understand that the author chose these accents and verbiage to provide historical accuracy and context, but it would be inappropriate and disrespectful if I was to say these words and accents, so I'm not going to. Like all summaries, the words are altered, but I highly recommend reading this novel for the original wording and intentions. All right?
Yep.
That's I don't want to say it's a disclaimer, just an announcement.
Yep. But if you want to get a feeling of what the book is like, you can just watch this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
it's going to be great.
Yeah,
listen, audio forward.
Audio forward. I apologize.
All right, you ready?
Okay, I'm ready. Let's begin the story of Harriet Tubman live in concert, a novel by Bob the Drag Queen.
So we open in a nice room,
okay,
right? A handmade table, IKEA chairs, the classic braided rug, very minimalist around the room, right? It's just a nice room. Dead center on that beautiful table is a lantern. And we're seeing this room through the lens of Darnell. Darnell's looking at this room and he's like, God, it's nice. And there's just this lantern just in the middle of the room. You can't look at anything else but it. And he's nervous. He's like got the nerves of like when you're waiting in the dentist office lobby and you know you have like a big surgery, that kind of nervous. And he's nervous because he's about to meet his idol, America's first black superhero, the Iron Woman, basically an Avenger. Walking around this room, he goes up to the lantern, which is tarnished and clearly an antique, and it still smells like kerosene, and he picks it up. And he's staring at the lantern, imagining what it was like to run for your life through the woods, dogs at your heels, and like really taking in the power of this object, right? And in that moment, the door swings open to this room, and he's snapped out of his daydream, and standing right in front of him is Harriet Tubman. And she looks right at him and says, "Put that down." And he's like, "Oh, Miss Tubman, I can explain." And he's like trying to put it back on the table gently. "I'm just so excited to meet you. My name is Darnell. This is a dream come true." And she says, "Look, baby, thank you for your kind words, but we don't have all day." She's super direct. Darnell never thought this day would come, but so many figures have been returning from the past. And he had been hoping that Harriet would show up. And not only did she show up, but she reached out to him. And in society, it's been really weird to have all these people coming back from the past. Cleopatra came back, and now she's an Instagram model.
Okay.
The Rockefellers are on Twitter having public battles of wealth with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos.
Okay.
Everyone's waiting on pins and needles to see if Jesus comes back.
So the dead are rising, but they're coming back like as a full people. Okay, gotcha.
Something happened in the universe.
Yeah.
And people are coming back.
Okay.
But people are waiting for Jesus, but nobody actually thinks that Jesus is coming back. But Darnell's super excited about Harriet Tubman.
Okay.
Right? So Darnell's tripping over his words, trying to introduce himself, and he's paying her compliments like, you're amazing. I love you. I'm so excited. Like that the way you get when you meet your heroes.
Yeah.
And she's just straight staring at him, barely blinking, very stoic. It's like actually unnerving how quiet and stoic she is. And she interrupts him and she's like, Darnell, I want to talk to you about the new generation. I want to talk to you about Black folk today. And I think you might just be the person to help me reach them.
Okay.
Right? And he's like, me? What? What could I help you with? How the heck can I help Harriet Tubman? And he says that in his head, right? But the thing is like, he doesn't say it in his head. He says it out loud. And he says, how the fuck can I help Harriet Tubman? And she's like, she's like, whatever. I asked you to come here today because I've decided to make an album, and it's going to blend hip hop and spirituals. And she's trying to bridge the gap between the young today and their ancestors.
So she's trying to take 1860 and 2025.
Yep.
And have them meet.
Yes.
On a musical soundstage.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. This can only come from the mind of Bob the Drag Queen. That's so incredible. I'm already in. All right, I'm in.
You're in.
Okay.
So she wants these songs to tell everyone about how smart, strong, creative, and resourceful Black people are and what they have achieved and how powerful they are, right?
Okay.
And he is like inspired just by this concept, but he's also like, why me? Like, why have you reached out to me?
Yeah.
And she's like, the Lord told me to choose you, and I don't ask questions to the Lord.
This would be like if Obama walked up to me and been like, hey, we need you to figure out how to get votes via the internet. It also feels very much like a few times where I've been in meetings, they're like, how do we reach Gen Z? And I'm like, I don't know. But it's just like there's that moment. I can feel.
Ask Andrew Tate.
I understand. Oh, Jesus. I understand, though, like that feeling.
Yeah.
Of just like this person walks up to you and you're like, but you're, oh my God, what?
Yeah. So Harriet Tubman's like, listen, I have never questioned God in 90 years. Mm-hmm. God's been talking to me and I do whatever he says and he hasn't steered me wrong. And you probably should listen to him too. So don't question him. Right. So immediately she's like, don't question him. And he's like, as she's talking about the God situation and how she listens to him for inspiration, he kind of immediately shuts down a part of his brain and he's like, I don't want to explain to Harriet Tubman that I think religion is a scam and that he has big misgivings about religion, and he doesn't think that like
I'm gonna tell you something right
now.
If Harriet Tubman came back from the dead and told me you need to help me create a gospel hip hop album to bring the people together,
yes,
I would believe in God.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just saying, if Harriet Tubman came back from the dead and was like, you will help me craft a hip hop gospel album, I would be like, yep,
sure enough.
God is real.
God is real.
And God is good. I just, in that moment, it's a lot like in Marvel Comics, there's this thing that happens a lot where the people have crises of faith while standing next to Thor.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's literally Thor. He's the god of thunder. And like Hercules will walk in. Like actual gods exist in the Marvel universe and the DC universe. Like in comic books. They exist. But then there are still atheists. And I'm like, weird.
I don't know, guys.
And so like, in this moment, I would all of my beliefs
out the window
because I'm going whatever the new normal is. Eventually you have to admit, hey, the house is on fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't be like, I don't believe in fire. We're an anti-water household, whatever. Eventually there's a flood or there's a fire or there's something, and you just go, listen, this is just what it is now.
Yeah.
Harriet Tubman is back. Cleopatra's on Instagram.
She would be making Instagram model posts for sure.
I don't know, actually. I think Cleopatra was actually much smarter than people give her.
Well, woman.
Well, no, I know. But I'm saying is like I feel like she would really be rocking the podcast circuit.
You think she'd be a podcaster?
I think she would make the Call Her Daddy, whatever her name is.
Oh yeah.
She would make her.
Got it.
She'd be scaring her because she spoke like 12 languages.
Yeah.
Don't get me on my Cleopatra shit.
Okay,
I'm a Cleopatra stan.
Listen,
and not
and you would have
because
followed her Instagram page, no doubt.
I would have followed her on Threads because I care more about what she has to say than staring at her beauty, which has actually been described as average.
Wow.
I'm just saying, everything we know about her was written by her enemies, and then people came in and then just said the opposite about her enemies. But we're not talking about Cleopatra.
Sorry.
We're talking about Harriet Tubman,
Okay.
live in concert by our favorite drag queen, Bob the Drag Queen.
That's true. So he is just like, he doesn't decide he's not going to
Darnell.
argue with her,
Yep.
Darnell, and he's like, yes, ma'am, I understand. So she's like, follow me. I want to show you what I've been working on. And he agrees to, they never really have a conversation. He just kind of follows behind her. And they walk into this rehearsal room because they're in like a big studio area. So they go into this rehearsal room and there's a live band, backup singers, and a huge DJ booth. And he can't believe it that she's dead serious.
I'm picturing, do you know the Beyonce Coachella performance?
Yes.
And how they kept cutting back to her. Because it was the first time really that I'd seen the stage practice room.
Yes.
And actually T-Pain just did Coachella. And
Yeah.
they showed him like, even the stuff that you think is just like a throwaway, he's like, all of these are planned. Everything has to be intricately planned.
Yeah.
And so I'm picturing that studio.
Exactly. I
with
think
a
so, too.
giant, massive, it's like an airport hangar.
Yes.
I'm sure this is probably one of the smaller ones where it actually looks more like the studio where Boyz II Men and Mariah Carey did their album. You know what I'm talking about? Yes. From that music video where it's like the wood paneling. It might be that size. Is it a large?
Oh my
what
God.
are you picturing?
I picture it like the Mariah Carey version.
Okay.
The smaller.
Also, the Chili's baby back ribs commercial. That's just when I picture, like, people are like, oh, Abbey Road. I'm like, no. This is a modern. It's modern.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of wood paneling.
Yeah.
A lot of wood paneling is what I'm picturing.
So Harriet's like, this is my band. They're called the Freemans.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Harriet and the Freemans?
Harriet and the Freemans.
Okay.
It's made up of people that she's helped and people that have helped her.
Okay.
First, we're introduced to Odessa.
Okay.
And her and Harriet met during the Combahee ferry raid. She's really pretty and she has big wavy hair and she's mixed race.
Okay.
And Darnell looks at her and thinks that it doesn't look like she's had a hard day work in her life. And as if reading her mind, Harriet says, even house slaves worked incredibly hard and wanted to run. Okay? You don't even want to know what you got to do to stay in a house where you're a pretty girl like Odessa.
Got it.
Okay, so she spots his shift in his eyes.
She clocks.
And clocks him immediately.
Yeah.
So she helped take part in her own liberation and hasn't looked back since. And according to Harriet, she can sing. Okay. So Odessa looks at Darnell and she's like, is it true that you wrote Bad Bitch Boot Club?
But,
And he's like, yeah, I wrote and produced it. But he's like confused and embarrassed because he starts thinking about the lyrics of that song. And it's like these like basic training for these hoes and how she's a 10 hut slut. And he's thinking about these lyrics and how he's in front of Harriet Tubman and how this woman knows what they are.
Okay. This very much reminds me of, we were watching a documentary and I think it was Snoop and I think the NWA or somebody, they had to go speak. Who's Whitney Houston's? I can't believe I'm blanking on her name. Whitney Houston's.
Bobby Brown?
No. Godmother, aunt.
Whitney Houston's godmother.
Yes.
Oh,
Dionne Warwick.
yes.
They had to go talk to Dionne Warwick.
Yeah, because Snoop got in trouble.
And they were putting out so much misogynistic content and stuff like that. So they had to go. They're like, you've been called to Dionne Warwick's house. They had to go there like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m.
Yeah, because she's grown.
And they all have her. She has them like lined up in front of like her mansion. And then she comes out and they're like, hey, Dionne Warwick or whatever. And she's like, okay, hello. I want you to call me a hoe. And they were like, what? Like, I want you to call me a bitch. And they're like, oh, blah, blah. And like it was one of those moments where like, yeah, you're keep writing all these lyrics about like hating women and like being rude to women. Like realize that you're speaking about me, Dionne Warwick, in that moment. And it was just like this crazy. I can't remember which. I watched a lot of VH1 behind the music. Some people would say I've been more behind the music than I have been listening to it.
Oh.
I'm bad at lyrics. But
Pop-up video.
that's the kind of moment that Darnell is kind of having.
Yeah.
Of just like, imagine.
Oh.
You're
You're
like,
someone that came from 1860 and was listening to you sing songs.
The Bad Bitch Boot Club.
About the 10 hut slut.
That's just a crazy.
It's a great line. And so he's like, I can explain about this song. And in his mind, he's like, it was 20 years ago. He's a different person. Mm-hmm. And Harriet looks at him and goes, I liked it, but I prefer the song you did with Dr. Slim. And when she says this, he like winces, like his whole body kind of just like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That's how I feel when I do radio or interviews and I meet somebody and they'll be like, oh, you. The Mexican pizza rant guy. And I'm like, I've done so much since the Mexican pizza rant.
Your car smells like
my car smells
Mexican
like
pizza.
shit. Yeah.
You're the car smells like shit guy.
I'm the car smells like shit guy. And I'm like,
damn it.
No, sometimes you just do stuff and you don't really think.
Yep. And you weren't monetized before that one went live.
Yeah,
so
I wasn't. It's the day I die. So many people have monetized off that video that weren't me.
So Harriet walks over to another person that's there, and there's a man. He's really big, and his name is Buck.
Yeah.
And he's plays the guitar, and he's very kind of scary looking because he's so big.
Yeah.
Darnell describes him as wide as he is tall. He's bald, and he says he looks as if Michael Clark Duncan ate Michael Clark Duncan.
Got it.
But he has really nice eyes, soft eyes. So that's Buck.
Yeah. Michael Clark Duncan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Harriet's like, he doesn't talk much, but he is smarter than most people she knows. A lot of people have ideas about you before they even know you. What do you call that again, Buck? And Buck lifts his head slowly and quietly mumbles, preconceived notions.
Yeah.
And Harriet's like, that's right, preconceived notions. She says, I like the way black people talk today. The only people that spoke like that back in my day were Frederick Douglass. And let me tell you, most black people don't like Frederick Douglass anyhow.
What? Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass have beef?
Ops.
They're ops?
No. So Darnell is like, wait, I don't want to gossip. And I don't want Harriet Tubman to think that I'm a gossip. But he looks at her and he's like, tell me why black people don't like Frederick Douglass.
This is news.
But he says it. He's like, Miss Tubman, why? And she's like, don't call me Miss Tubman. Just call me Minty. That's what everybody calls me. And so he's like, okay. Minty, why do people hate Frederick Douglass? And she says, well, I didn't say hate. You're adding stuff. Everybody respected Frederick Douglass, even racist white people. And she's like, people were jealous. He could read, he could write, he was educated, and he had light skin. They thought he was uppity. When you're told you're supposed to be low, you sure don't want to be down there by yourself. And when she says that last part of that statement, everybody in the room kind of like takes a moment and is like, it resonates as she booms them with it, right? And now she walks and introduces him to the next guy in the room, who's the DJ. He's at the DJ booth. She says, this is Quakes. We call him that because he's a Quaker.
Got it.
DJ Quakes. Because he's a Quaker and a DJ. And Darnell immediately was like, this guy looks crazy. And he's dressed like a real Quaker.
Okay.
He's really short, 4 feet tall. He has a really big gray unkempt beard that connects with his hair and his eyebrows. He's dressed like the classic Quaker. Black coat down to his knees, dark brown shirt, white socks up over his calves, and a wide brim hat.
Yeah, okay? Like Quaker Oats.
Quaker Oats, right?
He's looking like the guy on the Quaker Oats box.
So just really short.
Yeah.
And Harriet says to Darnell, a lot of people don't know, but the Quakers helped a lot of us get to freedom. Mm-hmm. And they're good, God-fearing people that believe the Bible, and I like that.
And that's because of a dwarf.
Yes.
That's because of a dwarf in Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania dwarf is the one who changed the Quakers to become abolitionists by stabbing Bibles full of blood. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it's a crazy story, and maybe we'll cover it in a future episode.
So a skinny guy standing behind her clears his throat, behind Harriet, and she's like, how could I forget to introduce you to this man? This is my little baby brother, Moses, and he's our drummer. She gets choked up looking at him and talking about how grateful she is to be free with him, and he's just like, Darnell is getting overwhelmed. He has a million questions about this band, Harriet Tubman.
It's all so sudden.
It's so crazy.
I know, like,
he walked into this room and it's like poof.
Yeah, he was like, he's looking at a lantern, and then before you know it, she's like, Harriet Tubman's like, you're gonna be.
This is my brother, and we're in a band.
You're gonna produce my band, Harriet and the Freemen. You're like, whoa, what the fuck?
So she directs him to go sit down in a chair and tells him to listen. They're gonna perform for him.
Oh, God.
They gather around and they all say a prayer.
I'd be so terrified if they were bad.
Asking God to help speak through them. Okay. Darnell is very uncomfortable. He doesn't know if he should bow his head and like pretend. Mm-hmm. But whatever they say.
I would pretend.
Yeah.
I would. I'm very much the guy who looks around as everybody bows their head in the church because I'm a dick.
Yeah.
But like in that moment, Harriet Tubman comes back from the dead. I'm bowing my fucking head.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely.
I'm bowing it low.
It's called respect.
Yeah.
So Harriet's like, all right, DJ Quakes, let's do it. And then the music starts.
DJ Quakes is still nuts.
And it's a combination hip hop, rock and roll, spirituals. Mm-hmm. The music fills the rehearsal space. Rock guitar, 808 drums, blowing Darnell's hair back.
Okay.
Harriet Tubman grabs the mic and starts singing. And her voice is like Dr. Dre and Ella Fitzgerald had like a child. Angry, strong, and smooth all at once, right? Mm-hmm. And I did bookmark the first part. This is what she sings, right? I'm only going to read, not sing.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to read the lyrics of this song that we have. Wanted a chance to write some good music. I mean some hood music. I'm talking about wish a motherfucker would music. Liberate my people through the swamps and the woods music. Never would have made it if I didn't know I could music. No book smart, so there was very little education. But I made it with a little bit of divination. Got a call to liberate a generation. So let me slow down to see if you don't get the correlation.
That's incredible. I also in that moment, I'm trying to picture. It's difficult because it's coming from you.
Yeah.
Versus like how it would come. Would it feel like a mid-90s movie where it does, we're going to mix rock and roll and hip hop? You know what I mean? Like there is a certain way. I know that if Bob, like how Bob the drag queen came up with it in their head, how it would come through. And I wonder, I just like, I want to hear that now. I'm also immediately trying to like picture the band and I'm trying to cast them in my mind. And just
I think
picture,
you should start
this
with...
feels, you have to start with Harriet, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm already into this needs to be a movie.
Yeah.
And
I would absolutely.
It needs to be a movie.
Yeah.
Keep Disney away.
Yeah. No.
That's my only thought is keep Disney away. I just feel like they'll flub it.
HBO Max.
No, I don't even know those.
You want to go
right now.
to the movies?
No, I don't want HBO. I want to go to the movies.
You want to
yes,
go to
I
the
do
movies.
want to go to the movies.
Yeah.
I feel I'm already like Warner Brothers is out.
Yeah.
Disney's out. I don't know. I mean, that does leave like Paramount basically, or like Amazon.
No.
But like, I just feel like maybe this should be indie. I don't know.
I don't know.
We'll
know at the end.
You know what? We're gonna leave it up to Bob. Bob, whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to do,
because
Bob.
I'm already in love with this.
After the song ends, he doesn't know what to do. He's kind of just sitting there in shock, staring at them.
Yeah.
And Harriet's like, what do you think? And he just starts clapping like crazy. He doesn't say anything, he just like claps.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like...
Again, even if it was bad.
Yeah.
Even if it was bad, I mean, they're getting the same reaction.
Yeah.
That's the part that's difficult with somebody this famous.
But it was good.
It's really good.
It was really good.
Okay.
And Darnell thinks it's amazing. And also he's like, I don't know what you want from me in this scenario. Like, do you
what do I need
applause,
to add?
feedback? Like, and she's like, what don't you understand? The Lord told me you were going to help me. We are going to write and share an album with the world, go on a national tour. And he is like, again, why me? And she's like, how many times do I have to tell you to stop questioning the Lord? So he's like, I'm going to go take a minute. And he steps outside to collect his thoughts.
He's getting reverse J.D. Vance. It's just instead of the Pope dying, Harriet Tubman's like, God told me.
God told me. So he goes out back to kind of collect his thoughts.
Yeah.
And Moses comes out and he's having a cigarette. And he confides in Moses that he doesn't feel qualified for what she's asking. And like he's just kind of worried about the group.
But he wrote Bitch Boots.
I know.
Like, I
Bitch
feel
boot
like
camp.
don't have. Okay, I understand in the moment of having imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But Darnell, it's
Darnell.
music. We know you're good at music.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm getting mad at the character.
Okay, don't get married yet.
I'm not. I'm just throwing it out there. There's moments like this where it's like, well, you're good at music. Be good at music.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Moses basically slightly calms down. He's like, listen, nobody's judging you here.
Mm-hmm.
You were asked here for a reason.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about like feeling one way or another about this situation, right?
Yeah.
So he goes back in and he goes back to Harriet and he's like, okay, I'll do it. And she looks at him. She's like, it wasn't up for negotiation. Like, she's like, yeah, you're doing it. Like,
I'm picturing like 4 different older women in my life who this is very true.
Yeah.
I'm picturing one in particular who you know who I'm thinking of. But yeah, this is very much of like all right, fine. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me. You were already doing it. You never had a choice.
These sandwiches are good. Yeah.
My mom did that to me yesterday.
That was so funny.
My mom made these little ham sliders. And I was like, oh, Mom, this is a really good sandwich. I know. It really caught me off guard. She's never been that short with me before.
I loved it. 10 out of 10.
You were cackling.
Just like I did now.
Yeah.
Still funny. So Darnell decides, okay, he's going to take time with each person in the band because he wants to go over their history so he can get a better idea of how to help write this album and express what the band wants to express with Harriet Tubman, right?
Gotcha.
So first he starts talking to Odessa and he's asking her, like what it was like to be a house slave and the differences between herself and the people that worked outside. And she's very kind of nonchalant about it, right? But she does have a resentment that like you can feel bubbling while she's describing it because the people that worked in the fields always act like they had it harder, she said. And they don't understand. They worked from sun up till sundown. But in the house, they worked from every moment they woke up till the moment they went to sleep. They did everything. Cook, clean, took care of the kids, blah, blah, blah. And Darnell's having this conversation with her. And at a certain point, he's like, well, did they cook for themselves sometimes? And she like cackles like I did, starts laughing. And she actually yells back to Harriet, who's on the other side of the room. And she's like, did you hear what he just said? And then she repeats the question, did the white people cook for themselves? And then the whole room starts laughing. And she goes on to explain to him, like, no, they didn't do anything for themselves. And also, she doesn't understand how they're so bad at cooking because they all got the best cuts of meat, while black people had to learn how to make intestines and brains and feet good.
Yeah.
And now 100 years later, Paula Deen is on TV acting like she came up with Southern cooking. Mm-hmm. She's just railing about this, and I loved it.
That's very interesting because it's a really good way to show because it's like being inside versus outside. It's not that one was better than the other; it was that they were different.
Yeah,
and that's just true.
Different levels of
no, just also that they're just
exploitation.
but also that they're just truly are different. And from being inside the house, she's looking out. She's like, well, at least when the sun goes down, you're done.
Yeah,
and it's like when the people inside are like, well, you're inside.
Yeah.
I mean, the people outside in the field are looking, going, you're inside.
Yeah.
It's like that different. Also, the cooking thing is hilarious. The idea that any of them would cook is nuts. And also not something I've never really thought about. But I think I'll keep thinking about, right now, the Elon and those psychos are pushing the robots. Yeah. And one of the things that they keep pushing with the robots is like, oh, yeah, it'll like walk your dog for you. I'm like, but that's why you have...
Having walking the dog is part of the joy of having a dog.
You
get to go outside.
But all of the things that they describe, that these rich tech people describe, are removing the parts of humanity that makes life worth living. Yeah. And so Darnell's question of like, well, what do they cook for themselves? Because we find a pleasure and joy in cooking.
You should have seen the cookbook party yesterday.
Oh yeah. No, I'm saying, but I'm saying it's like so in that, and so then Odessa being like, these people are fucking crazy. Yeah. Because they have the best cuts of meat, but they have no even concept that they even have it. Yeah. It's just so wild. All right.
Oddly enough, this conversation makes him hungry, and he suggests they go out for some food. And while they're in New York City, by the way. Okay. While they're walking through the city, Odessa's pretty overwhelmed about walking. They're in the Harlem area, and they're pretty overwhelmed by just the sheer city energy, right? They get to this restaurant. It's packed. He's like, I don't think we're going to get a table. And immediately everybody in the restaurant sees Odessa, and like everyone can tell who the past people are. So like she gets to see like everybody's like, oh my God, yes, absolutely. And they go to like a soul food restaurant, and Odessa eats basically everything. She orders one of everything. And while they're eating and having like normal conversation, she looks at him right in the eye and she's like, what do you do with all of this? And he's like, all of what? And she's like, all of this freedom. And the question itself knocks the wind out of him. Like he does not know how to respond because it's such a big question. And so he responds and he's like, let me ask you a question. When did you realize you could be free? And she explains that she really didn't believe that she could be until the day she made it to Philadelphia.
Hey.
She grew up.
You hear that? Hold on. You hear that? She didn't say in New York. No, she said in Philly.
She said Philadelphia. She's like,
she made it to Philadelphia.
She said, this is what freedom looks like? Hell
it
yeah.
looks terrible.
Hell yeah, dude.
Man, freedom's covered in garbage.
What are the rats about?
Yeah. The pigeons here look sick. Here.
That's a cat. So
I love our trash city.
Me too. So she's like, her mother was an enslaved person. Her mother's mother was an enslaved person, and so on and so on. So she didn't know any free people. And the abuses and exploitation that they all suffered are locked into her blood and bones and DNA. And so, like, she never even considered freedom as a possibility, right? It was just never a thing. And then the day that the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment came to the plantation with Harriet Tubman was glorious. It was the most beautiful day of her life. And as she's explaining this, she starts like crying, right? Like quietly crying. That day she was paralyzed with fear, joy, excitement, pain, everything all at once. And she heard muskets and people screaming. And she heard someone say, Harriet's here, Harriet's here. And she said every slave worth a nickel knew who Harriet was. She was the most famous black person alive next to Frederick Douglass. Not that his uppity ass would ever come see us.
Okay. It's such a crazy subplot.
I know. I love it so much.
It's such a crazy subplot. I do worry that if this did become a movie or a musical, like a play, that it would create like the way when Hamilton became it. A lot of people are like, oh my God, Alexander Hamilton. It's like, well, Alexander Hamilton's like kind of
a scumbag.
Kind of a fascist.
Yeah,
like Lily is a fascist, but I don't know. It's so like I do worry that it would end up.
People be like, Frederick Douglass sucks.
No, I'm not saying that. But
no,
I feel like
edit that out.
I feel like leave it in for context. But I feel like it went when it goes mainstream.
Do you know the greatest part of the Hamilton lore on the internet?
What?
Is that the Trisha Paytas lore?
Oh my God. Why is Trisha Paytas involved
Why is
now?
she is internet? She is
Again,
internet. She is internet.
Literally before we sat down to record this video, you just told me the Pope died, and Trisha Paytas just announced a couple weeks ago that she's pregnant again.
Yeah.
And so it goes back into the Pope lore and the Trisha. People literally, we made a video, I posted it, and somebody said Trisha is the portal, and I'm stuck ever since.
Yeah, my favorite was somebody commented, how does this keep happening? Why do we have 3 nickels?
Yeah. But I know what you're talking about with the Trisha Paytas. It was the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, she was like, "Why are you quoting the Declaration of?" Or no,
she
said, "Why are you quoting Hamilton?"
And the guy's like, "It was the Declaration of Independence."
And she's like, "No, it's from Hamilton." And then she sang the Declaration of Independence song.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
That's what I mean. That's what would happen.
Yeah, no, that's what it was.
Okay.
Again, there's context collapse, and some people learn about Frederick Douglass and actually like get it.
Yeah.
And then some people yell, why didn't they teach me how to do taxes in high school? And they're like, it's called algebra. It was called math.
I had to go to summer school. So there were a lot of rumors about Harriet Tubman back in the day. Okay. Some people thought she was a ghost because like, how was she never caught? Most people thought she was a man. Some people thought that John Brown had faked his death and was running around in blackface.
I was with you when John Brown faked his death. I feel like John Brown would have
That's
been
from the book.
I know. I feel like John Brown would have been respectable enough though
Not to do that.
that he would not have picked up the shoe polish. Jesus Christ.
And so during all this chaos, again, we're back to the situation with Odessa when Harriet and the army had shown up. And Odessa runs and finds Harriet. And she says, "Are you Harriet?" And Harriet responds by saying, "You're free." And she starts describing in the plantation chaos. Everyone's going in every direction. But the real chaos happened after they were free, in the time where they were walking north. Because how were they supposed to navigate the world? Because they're walking into a situation where the white people have a 400-year head start.
Yes.
And so the real chaos begun entering this new phase of freedom. So they get back to the studio after this lunch. And when they're like, "Oh, what were you guys doing?" And Odessa's like, "Yeah, I was telling Darnell all about the emancipation." And Moses is like, "Half the folks don't even know they were already supposed to be free because nobody was going to tell them the good news."
Yeah.
And so they have like this conversation about the emancipation, right?
Yeah. And which is eventually that what he's talking about is why we celebrate Juneteenth.
Yes.
Because it was declared free, the slaveholding states and the ones, specifically the ones in rebellion, all of their slaves were free by Emancipation Proclamation. But I believe Delaware, Maryland, and I think there was one other, their slaves weren't free.
Yeah.
Because those were slave states, even though they were still part of the Union. Delaware has a very crazy history.
Yeah, Delaware.
When it comes to that Lincoln actually basically had them under martial law. And I believe Maryland as well. So it's like very nuts. And so it isn't until you really get the 13th Amendment and then the 14th that they get full freedom.
So
very glossed over part of our history because the Union and the abolitionists won the war and lost the peace.
Well,
And that's why people talk shit on Ulysses S. Grant.
okay.
Not me, though. That's my boy right there, Ulysses S. Grant. Oh, the Teapot Dome scandal. Yeah, well, how about you give me a little Teapot Dome? People talk shit on Ulysses S. Grant, but he went down there and he's like, "I'm going to shoot a Klansman." This is a Grant house.
So
I love this book. This book's bringing out feelings.
bringing up
I haven't
big
even read it. I'm just sitting
big
next
feelings, Big feelings.
Harriet Tubman live in concert.
So Darnell's like, "Harriet, when did you know you wanted to be free?" And so she tells this story about how, her mother had a lot of children, but every time that she gave birth, they were taken away and sold. She gave birth to Moses, and she wouldn't let them take him. And she stood up against the master and the people who were trying to purchase Moses. And in an act of defiance and bravery, she almost attacked someone that tried to collect Moses from her. And she could have gotten killed for it. And after this gripping story, like this really intense story, Darnell is really inspired and runs over to DJ Quakes and is like, "Give me a beat." And he has his notepad and he starts writing down some lyrics. And I'm going to read you the lyrics he wrote down. Hold on, I got to turn to page 40? I wrote page 40 in my notes, but I don't have page 40. Okay. As she stands in the doorway huffing and sweating, realizing she's fierce because her baby has been threatened, I see a woman at her wit's end. I need amazing grace. How sweet the sound. Don't want to turn this place into my burial ground. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Gotta put a plan in action. I'm not fucking around. You see, I once was blind, but now I see. And that's he keeps writing after that, but that's the last quote we get from the song he starts writing after hearing this story he was so inspired by. Yeah. So leaving the studio after this crazy freaking day, he's got like that buzz of excitement he hasn't felt in years, right? Like since he's been doing music, but not since his career blew up in his face years ago. He hasn't felt this real buzz of excitement about writing music.
Because he's been producing songs for TikTok.
Oh, okay.
Is that not implied?
No, that's not implied.
No, because like most songs now are designed for TikTok or for Instagram Reels or to be used, short little snips. So we'll listen to a song and be like, "Oh, the bridge, oh, I really like this song." And then you discover when you hear it on the radio, oh, that was just the 17-second bridge that I was really, really into.
I did like that.
Or you're like, "Oh, this song is Katy Perry."
Ugh. I did say that there's a song, the beginning of the Matt Berry song that's going viral, and everybody's discovering Matt Berry now.
Oh, you mean the song?
Acid jazz.
The song that plays every time we get into our car?
Yeah.
Because
It starts with an A.
It starts very early. Yeah.
So he goes home and keeps writing.
Okay.
Next morning, he wakes up energized, like without coffee energized.
Darnell,
Just so excited.
Yeah.
And he heads back to the studio bright and early, 9 a.m.
I have a friend named Darnell, and I just keep picturing him.
Yeah.
I just keep picturing my buddy Darnell, who used to work at a comedy club that I used to play at all the time. And he was like one of the ushers who like moved his way up to like assistant manager eventually. And I just keep picturing him.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it's just
That's
crazy.
great.
Yeah.
And so he gets to the studio and no one's there except for DJ Quakes.
Okay.
And Darnell's like, where is everybody? And DJ Quakes is like, it's Sunday. And
Fair.
Darnell's like, okay, what is this, Chick-fil-A? And Quakes is like, at church. Everyone's at church. And it didn't occur to Darnell that everyone would be at church, right? And
he's like, wait, but you're a Quaker, so
Yeah.
you don't need to go to church. You just feel the
Darnell doesn't know this. Darnell's like, well, why
really?
are you at church?
Okay.
And Quake's like, well, I'm a Quaker, so
Yeah.
we don't do church. And Darnell's like, you'll have to forgive me. I don't know a lot about your religion. I've never met a Quaker. I only know the guy from the box of oatmeal.
Yep.
And Quake is like, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Pull up a chair, right? Because they're
All right.
alone. And he's like, everyone calls me Benjamin. And he's like, I'm smaller than most. I'm originally from Britain. I came to America in the 1730s. In this conversation, he invites Darnell to come to a meeting house for a religious ceremony. And Darnell like physically recoils. He's like, he doesn't know the difference between a meeting house and a church, but he immediately is like, no. The correlation, he's like, no. He tells him that he never really felt accepted by the church, so he's just written it off for good. And Quakes is like, I'm sorry to hear that. You know, religion should be a force of bringing people together, not tearing them apart. And Quakes asks Darnell if he has any good suggestions for records, because Quakes has gotten really into records since he got back. And so they both nerd out about records for a while. And Quakes ends up lighting up a huge fucking blunt. And Darnell's like, should he go smoke that outside? And he's like, no, nobody cares. And Darnell says,
Also, New York is legal there.
yeah.
So.
Darnell says, Quakes, so Darnell says, Quakes, why do you care so much about Black lives? And Quakes looks at him with intense sincerity and like the glossy tears in his eyes. And he's like, I believe there is a light inside of all living things. There is a little bit of God in all of us, and therefore we are all worthy of respect. They talk a little bit more about religion, and Quakes explains about how meeting houses work, where everybody stands up after they're sitting there facing each other, and then they stand up when they feel inspired by the word of God. And there's no pastor or preacher. And Darnell is like, you know, like sleeping, but then all of a sudden Quakes is like, but you know, I'm not actually allowed to go to meeting houses anymore. I was politely asked not to return to most of the meeting houses because of my radical views. And Darnell's like, radical views? He's like, yeah, I was really shocked at America's views on slavery. Don't get me wrong. I have gripes with the way England treats people as well, but that's why I decided to come here. So when the spirit moved me, I would stand up and make my feelings known. They did not like that. People did not like that. And that's how I ended up living in a cave right outside of Philly.
This is the guy I was talking about. This is the exact guy I was talking about. The dwarf. Yeah, Benjamin. What the hell's his last name? I was going to do an episode about him. You let me just yap.
I did.
You just let me yap about this guy, and you're like, yeah, he's the character. This fucking guy.
But also, I need to, for the listeners who've listened to our other episode about this is a different cave than the Kelpis caves where the Society
Yes.
of Women of the Wilderness were. There's different Quaker caves.
There's-
Guys, we got caves, and there's Quakers in them. Okay, this is a different Quaker.
Benjamin Lay.
Benjamin Lay, yeah.
Wait, so is this Benjamin Lay?
Yeah.
But I thought you said he was black.
No, he's white.
Oh, when you were describing him, I pictured him as black.
No, I said he had a black coat on. No, he's the only white guy.
Oh, I didn't realize that he was okay.
Yeah.
This is Benjamin Lay. I love Benjamin Lay.
Yeah.
His story is so crazy, and how, like, what the changes he went through, and then his wife also had dwarfism, and the living in the cave thing, because he really shamed the rest of the Quakers.
Yeah.
Because there were Quakers during his time that were slave owners, and he was like, how the fuck can you claim that you're touched by God when you are directly going against what's in the book, when you're blah, and everyone's like, oh, fuck. And he was just such... I first read about him in Philadelphia Weekly, and I'll never forget the image was this crazy picture of this wild-eyed little guy stabbing a Bible and blood squirting at it, because he had a gimmick Bible, which is so pro wrestling. But then the actual painting of him, if you Google him and go to his Wikipedia page for Benjamin Lay, the actual painting of him is nuts.
Yeah.
Like, it's a crazy looking painting. And
Quakers, man.
I just assumed that this wasn't Benjamin Lay when you're describing him. You're like 4 foot. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, okay, whatever. It's just,
So they have this conversation, and then Buck shows up.
okay.
And he's like, just stop by to get my coat. Harriet doesn't like us to work on Sundays. And that's how we find out that Buck doesn't go to church either. They have a discussion, the three of them, about Buck's feelings about church and religion. And Buck's like, listen, if you're Christian, you don't want to hear my opinion. And Darnell's, still just kind of asking because, he doesn't really align with religion. And Buck is basically like, listen, Christianity is a weapon wielded against black people, and I don't associate with things that hurt people, my people or me.
Yeah.
Right. So Buck's not about the religious stuff, but he respects obviously Harriet and everyone else.
Yeah, because the Christian religion specifically in the American South was used to justify slavery.
Yes.
And it was also, there were stories that we know of like them teaching with certain passages left out.
Yep.
To not let them know that their masters were going to church where it was telling them that slavery was bad, and that they were reading books that were straight up saying what you're doing is a sin and should be stopped.
Yeah.
And in fact, the guy who we based our entire religion on would be ashamed of this.
Yeah, big time.
But instead, the justifications that were being used and the system of oppression that it was all mixed in is like nuts. And when you get deep into the northern views of Protestant Christianity and the southern views and the schism and the split there, it's very, very wild. That's why it's always interesting to me, especially being in the North, whenever I meet somebody who's like a Southern Baptist but like lives in Pennsylvania. I'm like, that's not right.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so the next day,
Okay.
they're all back in the studio.
Okay, everybody's back in the studio.
Monday, and Harriet is going to tell her story. So Darnell and the whole group are kind of like shuffling into one room, and she's going to kind of stand in front of them and tell the story.
Yeah.
And she's being kind of short with him, like as they're like getting everything ready. And Darnell is like very like, is she mad at me? Like, because like she's just being short. And they're all like, no, this is something she does. Like, and we learned that back in the day, basically there was a point in time where Harriet was a circuit speaker. She went to raise money to help rescue people from slavery. And so she would tell her story all the time because a lot of Northern abolitionists didn't want to get their hands dirty. So they would go to churches and town halls and listen to people like Harriet or John Brown or Frederick Douglass or Henry Box Brown talk about the journeys and how they fought for freedom, and then give them money to help pay for expenses, medical care, food, stuff like that. So this isn't her first time telling the story. She's just kind of like, guys, we gotta go. And he was taking it as like, is she mad at me? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because today, speakers like this, you have some like what was her name? The girl from, was it Pakistan? Malala.
Oh yeah,
Like-
the going to school. Malala,
Yeah,
the
who
story
got
about
shot.
that.
Yeah. She was a speaker.
Yeah.
And so she would go around and she would speak in front of these groups. Who's that other girl? The one that the conservatives hate.
Greta Thunberg?
Greta Thunberg. She gives a lot of speeches and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But for advocacy more these days, when you're not, back then you would go to organizations to reach individuals.
Yeah.
Now you reach individuals through social media, And then to do the orgs, you then have to already have that individual reach.
Yeah.
You have to show up with X amount of Instagram followers, X amount of TikTok followers. Now it's just like it's backwards.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre.
So Harriet does go in to tell her story about how she was a young girl. When she was a young girl, she was at a local grocery store, and a slave master was trying to discipline a young man who had run away while there was at the grocery store, and he picked up a heavy floor weight, like over 5 pounds, and he threw it at the young man's head, but it missed and it hit her right in the face, knocking her out. And she could barely stand for months. And to this day, she just passes out sometimes where she stands. She has like actual brain damage. And so like she could just be staying there and all of a sudden she'll just pass out cold. And after this incident, she felt that she was growing closer to the Lord because she could hear God's voice clearer than ever. And from this, she never questioned the Lord again because, you know, she survived it. The people that enslaved her tried to sell her because of this, but nobody would buy her because she was, you know, disabled in this way. Also, she said she wasn't light-skinned or pretty enough to be in the house. So nobody wanted to pay money for someone that they didn't feel could work, right?
Yeah.
So one night, she's praying to God to change her enslaver's mind, and she humbly asked God to change his heart or stop it so he could get out of her way. And a week later, he died. And that was all the signs she needed from the Lord.
Listen. I mean,
Linda.
that would be like shaking someone's hand and then they immediately die. Honest.
So they're talking about, you know, did she run away? The first time she ever ran away, she went with her brothers and they got as far as Maryland, but her brothers panicked and went back. And so she went back with them, and she tried again on her own. And Darnell's like, how did you know where to go? Like, you didn't have Google Maps. And Harriet's like, what is a Google Maps? And she explains to him the way that they knew which way to go was enslaved people would communicate with each other through song. So the songs like the River Jordan and Going to the Promised Land were actually about the Ohio River. And wading through the water was directing people to walk in the water so the dogs can't track you. And so all of these spiritual songs were actually directives given from slaves that had successfully made it and had come back in a way and brought these songs because they could sing them and they wouldn't get caught.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't get in trouble. Because there are songs that are referenced in this book that if they sang them, they would get, you know, really beat up or hurt or killed for singing them. So these were songs that were fronted as religious songs, but are actually directives on how the path to take, right? So really...
so they spoke through metaphors because they trusted their audience to understand how to parse them and to really process them instead of having to do direct call to actions.
Like and subscribe. And so... and realizing... so Darnell's having this realization, like hearing this story is so crazy.
Yeah.
And he's realizing that this black woman who was illiterate, handicapped, born a slave, and tiny, saw something in herself and went for it the way she did, really broke him down. Like, he just starts weeping, and Harriet holds him, and she starts singing. And we learn that Moses' path to freedom was just kind of... No, it wasn't kind of. It was a very inspiring story as well. And... I just to save time, I'm going to move it past it. But Moses' story is really intense as well. And as soon as Darnell hears it, it's like it inspires him so much. And his brain is going, you know, 1,000,000 miles a minute, thinking of all these different lyrics and songs that he wants to write about these stories. Because now he's heard Odessa's, he's heard Harriet's, and Moses is just like really just kind of kicks it off, right? So while Harriet's Harriet leaves, and they're having this conversation about a group of preachers and how certain preachers would weaponize the Bible, just kind of like what you were saying. And so what would happen is enslavers would pick certain people to be taught how to read, and the only thing they would be taught how to read was the Bible, and then they were in charge of reading the Bible to enslaved people for the reasons you were describing, right? Moses and them did know one preacher who would help and was part of the Underground Railroad, but overall they didn't often trust preachers because they knew that they were part of the staff, if you will.
It's also one of those things too in Christianity is there was a big push. It's not as pushed now in America as much.
Yeah.
But when you are oppressed or when you are downtrodden, the appeal of Christianity to the slave and to the poor is that after this life, it will be great.
Yeah.
And so suffering in this is actually a positive because it's going to be, you'll get twofold or tenfold back a better afterlife, which is why so many, especially in early Christianity, you're talking about the 200s, the 300s, Roman slaves were so pulled to it. It's also about, showing a little bit more respect and things like that. Obviously, American slaves weren't given that.
Yeah.
But that is kind of like where that play is. And that's the reason why Southern slaveholders would also be like, oh, it's fine that they can learn this part of it.
Yeah.
Because then they won't mind if they won't think about the fact that this is the only life that they'll ever have. Yeah. And that it'll be, they'll be completely owned by me. They won't have any option to choose whether or not they can even live with their own children, their own wives, their families can be ripped apart. At any point in time, the slave owner is allowed to kill them or do anything else even worse to them. And then eventually that will all be sanitized in Texas textbooks.
Yeah.
And they'll just put in that they were just volunteers.
Yeah.
I wish I was joking about that.
No. It's like the, what's it called? Like the evangelicals. Like they are willing to suffer now because they think the end times are going to be better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Harriet passes out.
And by suffer, you mean, never mind. I'm not.
No, this is a book club.
This is a book
I'm
club.
Sorry, story report.
Story report. We're on a story report. We're talking about Harriet Tubman live in concert, where Harriet Tubman and all of her friends and family come back from the dead to put on a concert.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yep.
So Harriet passes out. And
she has her fainting spell.
She has one of her fainting spells. And then, they're having conversation in the studio, blah, blah, blah. And Harriet wakes back up at a certain point, and Darnell looks over at her and is like, is there anything I can do to help you? Like a glass of water or something? And she looks at him and says, I want to know what you're going to do for yourself. And he's like, what do you mean? And she's like, I'm in the business of taking people to freedom, and you aren't free of something. And what it is, I don't know. And it's none of my business. But we got to get you to the promised land.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's really weirded out by this.
Yeah. The chains are capitalism.
Because he's like, does she want me to convert to Christianity? Like, what does this mean? They go and get some water from the water cooler because, she just woke up and she's dizzy. Yeah. And while they're at the water cooler, he's asking her more questions about her past. And he apologizes. He's like, I'm sorry. I just keep asking these things, because he feels like he's being intrusive. And she's like, I don't mind talking about my life because I know I'm serving a greater purpose. All abolitionists, especially the black ones, are used to talking about their struggles. We used to get up in front of dozens, sometimes hundreds of people preaching the word of abolition. She says it does upset her to talk about it and takes a lot out of her emotionally and physically, but it's never stopped her because she knows what she's trying to accomplish. And she says that usually abolitionists would gather in a church or a little tent. Different abolitionists would get all people together, but one of her favorites, Harriet says, was John Brown.
Our guy, friend of the show.
Our guy, friend of the show.
Friend of the show,
John Brown.
John Brown.
So, I wish we had a button for John Brown.
Oh, I do.
You do? That's not the John Brown button.
I'm in that case, he's my shadow daddy.
Darnell says, I think I may have heard of him, but to be honest, I don't remember much. Was he a former slave too?
Okay. Darnell not knowing about John Brown makes me mad at Darnell.
And from behind.
And about the American school system.
Yeah. So from behind, we hear, because again, he's having this conversation in the studio. We hear Odessa scream, "No, he was a crazy old white man."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that he was, says Harriet.
Yeah.
But he had a good heart. And I heard about him through my underground connections. A lot of the conductors were scared of him for a good reason. The man would ask you if you were pro-slavery or free states, and if you said the wrong answer, you better hope you sounded good, because those could have been your last earthly words. He was nutty as a squirrel turd. But ever since the day I met him, he treated me with nothing but respect. Nutty as he was a gentleman. I've never had a white man talk to me the way John Brown did, not even in Canada. He was the reason they called me General Tubman, she said with a huge smile on her face.
That's incredible.
Harriet was at first afraid of John Brown when she met him.
Because he had the wildest eyes possible. Like, he's just a nut job. But he was correct.
Yeah. Oh, no, she says, I wasn't afraid. Everybody else was afraid. I was excited because I heard he was a man of faith. So I knew the Lord would keep me safe while I was with him. Plus, when I first met him, he took off his hat. And, like, she says it like that, like, took off his hat. Yeah. And everybody in the room goes,
Yeah, it's a sign of respect.
And Darnell is like looks deeply confused and is not moved by the sentiment of the hat. And Odessa is like, clearly some folks weren't born slaves in the 1800s, and it shows. And Moses says, white folks didn't treat black people with any amount of respect back then, not even in the North. They would have you believe that once you crossed the Pennsylvania state line, white people started bowing to you and inviting you to fancy lunch dinners. Harriet said, Lord knows that wasn't the case, but the way John Brown respected me gave others the idea that I should be respected too. Darnell is inspired by his inability to understand this part of the experience. Like, he wasn't born into slavery, and he says, Minty, I have an idea. I want to see where you're born. I think we should all go back there together. And Buck says, I can't repeat the whole statement, but it's a, are you crazy?
Yeah.
type of situation. And they're like, why? And Moses, so people start kind of like yelling about like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And Moses is like, it could be good for him. He grew up in the city. He should see how we live so he understands. And Harriet agrees. So they all agree. They all just kind of agree, and they start packing their stuff. Right?
Okay.
They just get right into motion. It's very funny because nobody ever questions. It's like, okay, that's what we're doing. Got it.
Yeah.
And they start packing their stuff.
Again, they're back from the dead. So they're back from the dead. They don't know how much longer they have. Could they die again?
Maybe.
Also, they seem to come back at different stages of their lives.
Yeah.
Like, some of them, most of them, I believe, died like older.
Yeah.
Like, I know that Benjamin Lay was like super old. Harriet Tubman was very old.
Yeah.
So is she like she's a 90-year-old woman?
Yep.
Who apparently is still spry.
Spry.
Yeah. So I mean, like, that's crazy. So they're like, yeah, we should. Well, we should do this. Okay, yeah, maybe in like 2 weeks. No, we're doing it now.
Yeah, they just start packing their bags. Like, yeah, let's go. Put the backpack on.
Yeah.
And Harriet's like, all right, if we leave now, we could get there in about 5 days. Like, they're like talking about it. And Darnell's like, whoa. I'm gonna rent a van. And Harriet's like, oh, thank God, I am tired of walking. Because they all were just like, oh, we're gonna walk. They just
from New York City.
New York City. They're 5 days. And she's like, thank God I'm walking. But she does grumble under her breath while they're discussing renting a van about how she fucking hates that racist Henry Ford.
Good line.
So, fuck yeah, dude. Fuck Henry Ford.
Yeah.
An hour later, they're all crammed.
I'm gonna be left to assume that they met when everyone for some reason came back.
Yeah, or she just read like a article about him.
Oh yeah,
you know
what
I mean?
Henry Ford, famous Nazi.
Famous Nazi, Henry Ford.
An incredibly
it's
racist
like car ownership people have a weird alignment.
Do you own a car company? Do people call you a genius? You are going to be a racist.
Yep, that's how it goes.
Sorry.
So an hour later, they're all crammed in the minivan. Harriet's riding a shotgun heading south. Harriet starts telling Darnell about her favorite crazy old white man. She's
John
like,
Brown.
let me tell you more about John Brown.
Yeah.
She just like loves talking about John Brown. She's like, John Brown had a beard all the way down to his nipples and always had food in it. And
to
this
his
is
nipples.
It's just like
to his nipples is crazy.
See,
could have said chest. To his nipples.
But always, and this is something that like Darnell has noticed about DJ Quakes is that he always has crumbs in his beard because he's always eating like muffins or some shit.
Yeah.
And so it's just like this thing where like the crazy guys with beard just have dirt in them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, this whole time
I do this a lot.
Yeah, for a good reason.
I rub it out.
Whoa, this is a family channel.
The beard.
Oh.
I make sure. The other day I was eating something. I had tzatziki sauce in my mustache.
And the
all
waiter
over my
kept coming
mustache.
over.
The waiter come in, everything. I'm like, oh, it's great. And I just looked like
You look like you're at a dentist appointment.
I know. I look like I was at a bukkake party.
Hey, I said this is a family show.
Yeah, it's not.
So Quakes
We're
is in
deep
the back.
enough in It's a book club episode. Excuse me, it's a story report.
Story report.
So
We're
there's
rebranding.
no sponsor.
No.
So I can say whatever I want.
That's right.
Tzatziki Cumbath.
So
They're not going to edit that out.
Quakes-
You can pause as long as you want.
Quakes is in the back smoking a fat joint.
Hey.
And Harriet goes on. She's like, I felt bad for John Brown. He was super unlucky. He was the kind of guy who could dodge 100 bullets in battle and then trip over a stick and break his leg. He really believed in putting guns in the hands of every slave in the South. That's what really got the slavers scared. Some abolitionists wanted to free black people, but John Brown wanted to help us get revenge. He believed in an eye for an eye, and he thought the vengeance of the Lord was his to exact. He felt he was the executioner of God's will, and by his standards, he did just that. There was a time when he was the most feared man in America. Many abolitionists were helping people sneak around. John Brown wanted blood in the streets. His battalion was a hodgepodge of people from all different backgrounds, and she's talking about his hodgepodge of people, and she's like, I was gathering a group of like-minded people, and they had plans to meet up. So John Brown was in contact with her. He had this big idea, and they were going to meet up with their two groups of people to like execute this plan. And letters stopped coming, and she never heard from him again. And so Darnell's like, well, what happened? And she's like, he died fighting in the belly of the beast.
Harper's Ferry.
And Harriet believes that his death was the catalyst for the Civil War because he upset the beast's stomach so much. He was the indigestion of racism.
Yeah. But also he made it very clear that where this was heading.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, which we covered in our John Brown episode.
It's a great episode.
It's titled John Brown is Colder Than Ice.
Yep. Listen in.
Very good pun.
It was. We had fun writing that episode.
It's a good episode.
So the next morning, they go to the motel. They drive. They get to a motel. It's a pretty gross motel. They all get separate rooms except for Harriet shares a room with Darnell. And they stay up late talking more about John Brown, Frederick Douglass, and how the main work of abolitionists was to convince poor white people that they were being tricked by rich people. Like, rich people weren't out there dying in war trying to do this thing with slavery. Like, they had to convince the poor whites that if black people got rights, that would mean less rights for them.
Yeah.
So that was the job of the abolitionist speaker, right?
Was the pushback counter program. Yeah.
So she's talking about that again with the writing of this album, right? The next morning, they're all super excited to leave and get out of the motel and get back in the van. As they start the next part of their drive, Darnell, in a very somber way, is like, I think we need to talk about the war. And they all laugh at him. They're like, why are you so serious? LOL. They like Darnell really like, because again, he's missing so much context sometimes. Yeah. And these people have this lived experience. It's almost like
Darnell is a self-insert, also or a Mary Sue almost, but more of just like he's there to allow the reader to have ignorance about these topics.
Yeah.
He's there to frame it from a perspective of somebody who has like, oh, I've heard about Civil War. War's bad, right? It's like, well, the Civil War for the slaves is great.
But bad at the same time.
But they get free.
Unless they are forced to serve in the army.
Yes.
Ugh.
But I'm saying is like from that perspective, the same way it was like when people would be like, oh yeah, 1945 was like a really bad year. It's like, well, half of it. Yeah. For some people. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it flips.
So what I was thinking is the reason that Darnell doesn't really get why because they laugh a lot of this book, they are very funny. They make light of many situations. They're joking about stuff.
Well, it's gallows humor too.
Exactly. Yeah. What I was going to say is it reminds me a lot of when you hang out with people that have survived addiction and alcoholism. We have a funny way of talking about it. We have it's like once you've survived the natural disaster, you're on the other end and you're just like, fucking tornadoes, am I right? Like, you just have this way of being like, no, we're survived it. We're past it. We can make light of it in a way. And so they're always just like, Darnell says things like, I think we need to talk about the war. And they're like, lame. Like, duh, of course we're going to talk about the war. Like, just talk about it, right? Like, so there's this very funny back and forth between them. So they drive for an hour or so more. And they get to the Brodess farm, and it's a wide open expanse of empty land except for a small dilapidated church structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should take a break. They get out of the van, and everyone's very somber, right? Some people start wandering off. They're walking around, and there's a big sign, like a placard posted at the edge of the land, right where they kind of get out.
Okay.
And Harriet asks Darnell to read it to her. And it says, Harriet Tubman, 1820 to 1913, the Moses of her people. Harriet Tubman of the Bucktown district found freedom for herself and some 300 other slaves. In the Civil War, she served in the U.S. Army as nurse, scout, and spy. And Harriet is, there's tears in her eyes. And Darnell is like, I didn't know you worked in the Army. And she explains she tries to start explaining it, but then Moses pops up and he's like, my sister was the first woman ever to work for a military operation. And Harriet goes on to explain that during the war, there was a lot of work to be had. And in a way of making money, she used to make baked goods and then go sell them to the soldiers to make extra money. While she would do that, she started talking to a Colonel James Montgomery, who she met while doing this and became friends with. And while she's talking about it, she clarifies that not all Union soldiers were abolitionists. So, she was, trying to make it clear to Darnell that, she liked Colonel James Montgomery, but not all the guys in the Union soldiers were pro-black. Yeah. And you need to remember that.
So I just actually looked it up.
Okay.
Bucktown, Maryland.
Sure.
Just because I didn't know where it is.
Yeah.
So it's on the same... was it peninsula as Delaware. So you know how Maryland has that crazy shape because the Chesapeake Bay comes up in the middle?
Yeah.
So it's actually about 30 minutes from where I was born.
Oh.
So it's over on that side. It's near the Blackwater National Wildlife.
By that weird casino?
Yes, by the weird casino. But there's, when you type in, because I looked up Bucktown, Maryland. Yeah. Because you said the Bucktown district. And immediately it flagged the Harriet Tubman Museum and Education Center, the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Museum, and the site of Harriet Tubman's childhood home. Yeah. Are all right around there. But it's on the opposite side of the Chesapeake from Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and those things. So when you're going down the I-95 corridor. Yeah. So I just found that very interesting. As I was looking at that, it was just where she was, because I was born near there. We've grown up here. Mm-hmm. It's not really pushed that Harriet Tubman is a Marylander. Yeah. Especially living in Philadelphia, that actually just caught me off guard, really hard.
Yeah, because in Philly, we take ownership of a lot of people that come from Philadelphia.
Yeah, and she might be down in Maryland, but I'm just saying it's one of those things. The North, especially the border states, really, really like to pretend that they didn't have anything to do with this. Yeah. But also, Harriet Tubman is known for freeing people throughout the South. You know about her going to Virginia and all these other different places, and the picture in your mind of her, but you never thought about where she would have been born and where her slave owners were and where these things of her being of what we now view as the North. Yeah. Even though it's just south of the Mason-Dixon line, the Mason-Dixon line is the Maryland-Pennsylvania border. Yeah.
It's crazy.
This book just recontextualized a lot for me. Mm-hmm. And it's virtually a musical.
Musicals have a way of really speaking to the soul of a lot of things.
It's breaking through. Yeah. All right? The cabaret of our times.
As the people that 2 weeks ago were crying in New York after Cabaret. Yeah. A musical will get to you.
I'm obsessed with this book. Bob the Drag Queen, you've done an amazing job.
Yeah. We're not even done it yet.
I'm already set.
So she talks about the Colonel James Montgomery, and while she's talking about the Union soldiers and the way they treated people and abolitionists, she says, and she makes an offhand comment, and she's like, and definitely not Abe Lincoln. And Darnell is like, I thought Abe Lincoln was the biggest abolitionist there was. That's what they teach us in school. And Harriet loses her shit and is basically like, that motherfucker didn't want us to be free. He wanted to send us to fucking Liberia or Central America. And she starts screaming about Abe Lincoln. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, facts. So when Harriet stops yelling at Darnell about his American education, the group heads down to the church. There were the little churches. Go ahead.
I just want to give again context for the reader. Abraham Lincoln wanted to recolonize Africa with freed American slaves.
Yes.
He wanted to free them and then get them out. He also, the Emancipation Proclamation is also one, yes, it did free people down in the slaveholding states specifically, but it was used to keep the British out of the war, because during the Civil War, the British were siding with the Confederacy, but the British had already freed their slaves. And guess what? Didn't need to have a war to do it. They did it in Parliament. They went to Parliament and they passed a bunch of laws, and Britain had abolished slavery, and that actually the British Navy was part of stopping the Atlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
In particular. And so the British were, it was like a weird allyship, right? It was kind of, we've seen the Americans do this too, where we get allied with somebody who's like, our politics are weird. Mm-hmm. But like right now we have the same thing. And what the British really still wanted was cotton. Yeah. Because they still wanted to take that back to their textile plants in England and still be able to process all this cotton. So they were still running blockades. They were still offering aid. They were still helping the Confederacy. But by declaring that all of the slaves should be freed there, it kind of scared off the British Parliament, ambassador, and others, because they're like, oh, shit, this isn't like a war about whether or not the industrialized North and the agrarian South are having a little tit for tat over some random thing. This is now, it always has been, but this is now clearly a war about slavery and the legality of slavery in the United States. So Great Britain and the Westminster government could not be seen as openly supporting a slave nation.
Yep.
So what Harriet's saying is like, yeah, he was just a fucking politician like everybody else.
Yeah.
And also had his own like ideas. I always am like a little hesitant about there are some people who will say that Abraham Lincoln was a racist. I haven't actually read too much into it because the people who I've seen really push that themselves have actually been like insane neo-Confederate racists from times when I was down in North Carolina and South Carolina, where it gets pushed to be like, oh, yeah, sure. So the South was bad, but look what Lincoln himself actually not only, and it's secretly gay too. And you're like, all right, calm down, buddy. Yep. And they start pulling stuff out of context. But when it comes to he was part of groups and organizations that did want to send free blacks back to Liberia, which is on the west coast of Africa.
Yes.
So there.
Thanks.
This
is why this is a comedy history podcast. You bring the history, baby.
It's a story report.
But I'm saying,
and sometimes we got to add context to the comedy.
Absolutely. So they're heading back to that little church I told you about that's in the field.
Yeah.
And Darnell does not feel comfortable, right? He's like, I don't want to do this. But at the same time, Darnell is paranoid that Harriet is going to reject him if she finds out that he doesn't like religion. And he feels weird about entering the church. And like when they all kind of get to where the church is and they're going inside, he like gets a little lightheaded and needs to sit down sort of. And Darnell asks more questions about the Colonel James guy. And while they're talking, Darnell is so Harriet's kind of talking more about Colonel James, and Darnell is just like not really paying attention. That thing where like you're like, what we would be doing is like looking at your phone and ignoring, but he's kind of just like looking around, not really paying attention. He's like, you know what, I just need a minute. I'm just gonna step out. He's like gonna step out for fresh air, and he stands and he turns to walk out. And as he's walking out of the church, he hears the loudest cocking of a pistol that he's ever heard. And he hears Harriet say, "Don't even think about it. I know someone trying to turn their back when I see it. You are planning on leaving this room and not coming back. I know the look of someone afraid to continue the journey. Now, I have told you I am in the business of getting people free, and you aren't free." Holding a gun to the back of his head.
Now, my question.
Yeah.
Do they describe the gun? Is it still?
It's like a big ass musket, I think.
Yeah, but I'm saying like a flintlock, one of the flintlock pistol type of deal.
It wasn't described as that. No.
I just wonder if it's that or if it's like a revolver.
I feel like Harriet
Tubman. I know that's what I'm saying. Like if Harriet Tubman came back, I think the first thing she would do is one, be shocked that she could go to a gun store and just buy them, and she'd probably be like, "You guys have a lot of guns.
There's a lot of guns.
A lot of guns around.
What are the
here."
rules around these? Oh, there are none.
Yeah.
That's crazy. We really should maybe put some rules in place.
I feel like that she would still go for like a big revolver.
Absolutely, because she's little.
Yeah, but
She's
I also think that she wouldn't trust like a semi-auto.
Yeah.
To have to take it apart and put it back together in that sort of way, just because they were simpler guns back then with like the black powder.
It's like
and everything.
when we went from boomboxes to little iPods.
Yeah.
And they were like, "This holds all your songs." We're like, "Shut up, no, it doesn't."
No, some of us had to do a stage in between. Some of us had to go with mini discs, a Sony mini disc player, and he misses it every single day.
Mini discs. What's that?
Exactly.
Okay. So anyway, the book, we get to the end of that chapter and it says part 2. So we're at a whole different part.
Okay.
And guess what? This one, back in time. It's 2010 in Harlem. We're still with Darnell. So Darnell's waking up in his apartment next to a young man whose name he does not know. And his manager comes barging in the door and tells him to get his pants on and get that guy out of here. Dr. Slim, the super popular hip-hop star, is on his way over, and he needs to make a good impression.
Got it. So Darnell's in the closet.
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Slim comes...
the down low.
Yes. Dr. Slim comes over, and he's a bit of, like, this stereotypical hip-hop guy of 2010. He's like, yeah, where your bitches at type of thing, right? And Darnell's manager, her name is Suzanne, they have this meeting, and they plan to do a song, and Darnell's going to produce it. And after Dr. Slim leaves, his manager, Suzanne's like, makes him promise to stop drinking and picking up guys so that the rumors don't get around, because this is the biggest opportunity of his career, right? So later, Darnell is getting dressed to go over to Dr. Slim's studio, and he's trying to dress very butch. He's describing it himself. He's like, I'm trying to look really hetero, right? He does put on a cape and then has to like take off his cape. And I was like, the cape, you thought? Anyway. I
don't know why I'm picturing Birdman in a cape.
Birdman, yes.
Like,
Perfect.
I'm just picturing that clothes. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, with the big chain, the oversized T-shirt.
Yeah.
And then, like, almost like the military combat pants.
Yeah.
Like, that's a
It's
very...
2010.
Yeah, but a 2006 through 2010 type of feel.
Yeah. But just throw a cape on there.
Yeah, the
That'll
cape
look
though,
super
just the cape threw everything off,
butch.
because now I'm picturing the cape. Is it a Superman style cape? Does it have a collar like Dracula?
I was thinking
does it have
more-
a hood?
I pictured it more like when Childish Gambino was in Star Wars.
Oh, you're picturing a Lando cape.
Lando cape. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay. But
Right.
I'm still picturing it with a T. Now I need to know what the rest of the fit is.
Okay.
Because I'm so thrown off now.
Bob, please let us know in the
Bob,
comments.
Bob, please.
Can you stitch this TikTok for us?
Bob, please get in the comments and tell us what type of
What
cape.
was
What's
this
the full?
outfit?
Honestly, Bob, please stitch this TikTok where we have reviewed Harriet Tubman live in concert, and please explain to us exactly what Darnell was wearing when he maybe even could you wear it?
Can you put it on?
Could you point to go to Google image search and be like, this is around what I was thinking
Yeah.
of what Darnell was
What
dressed.
kind of cape was it?
When he met, what was the person's name?
Dr. Slim.
Dr. Slim. When Darnell met Dr. Slim, what did that outfit with cape look like? In your amazing book, Bob the Drag Queen, Harriet Tubman live in concert, a novel that everybody should read and that we are talking about here on the Story Report on Too Many Tabs. Special edition.
So,
I cut a promo
in the
an hour and 40 minutes into the episode.
Let's go. So he's dressed really cool and butch, and he goes to make music, and they go to the studio with Dr. Slim, and there's like, there's those like music people there. There's always music people in the studio. You know what I'm talking about. And there's this kind of scandalous girl. She's Dr. Slim's muse. She's like rolling a blunt, and she's dressed scandalously.
All right, it's Amber Rose. We get it.
So
She's like, in 10 years, in 15 years, I'm really going to support Trump.
whoa.
And I have my kids' names tattooed on my forehead. Blah, 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 blah.
I mean, the forehead's mistake you can remove.
Hey.
So while they work, they're working and they're coming up with music. The whole time people are drinking and smoking, blah, blah, blah. People are leaving, right? People are going. Dr. Slim is getting progressively drunk. Everyone is, kind of mulling about. And then at the end of the day, it's just the two of them in the studio, Darnell and Dr. Slim. And while they're together, They're like making this song so good. They're so happy. Blah, blah. Dr. Slim drunkenly confesses to Darnell that he is gay and that he knows Darnell is as well.
Uh-oh.
And if Darnell tells anyone, he's going to destroy him and his career. Darnell like kind of like calms him down. He's like, it's okay. I'm not going to tell anybody. Don't worry. But I don't think you should drive home. And Darnell gets him in a cab and they get back. He gets Dr. Slim back to his place safely, kind of like kicks him out of the cab and then goes to his house. And then Darnell makes a wild choice that night. I guess he had been drinking as well. He's at his apartment and at 5 a.m. he calls his manager because he's kind of in a panic about like what he just found out from Dr. Slim and that Dr. Slim's going to like kind of hurt him in some way because he has this information now, whatever. But he calls Suzanne. And she's like, what's going on? It's 5 a.m. And he's like, Dr. Slim is gay. And as soon as he says it, he realizes he's made a huge mistake. He goes back to sleep and he wakes up later in the morning to a bunch of voicemails. A lot from Darnell. A lot from Dr. Slim. And he's like listening to them. And it's like, call me back. I just need to check in with you. Like, you haven't called me back. Everything cool? And then it's like, I'm on my way over right now. Like it's like so like every voicemail is getting progressively crazy.
Yeah. More panicked.
And then as he hears this one that's like, I'm on my way over, there's a knock at the door. And it like, that like shock that happens to your body. Yeah. So he goes over and answers it and it's Suzanne. And Suzanne comes in and he's like, you got to get out of here. Dr. Slim's on his way over. And she's like, I'm not leaving. You need someone here to help you with this situation. It's too big for you to handle.
Yeah.
And Dr. Slim does show up and he's super weird. And he's like, can I talk to him in private? And Suzanne's like, whatever. So they go to another room and Dr. Slim thanks him for getting him home safe and tells him that he wants to come out, right? He's like, I want to come out. I don't want to live like this anymore.
Okay.
And Darnell's like, yeah, okay. Like, but he doesn't know him that well. So he's like, how can I help you with this situation? And Slim is like, listen, if we both come out, we're both successful. We have this new song we're working on. And if the song's good, we both come out and no one can say shit to us. Right? Would you do it? And like, he's like talking about this whole plan of them. Basically, they're going to put out this song. It's going to be a mega hit. And then they're going to come out together.
I'm going to throw it out there. This feels very much like when I get hammered and I'm like, I'm going to go shave off my beard.
Yeah, and I don't
This feels very much, listen, I understand the beard pun, but this is very much how many times we got hammered and then been like, I got to make such a life change.
Yeah.
And this is exactly this. I don't like this.
So then Suzanne, who's over listening through the door, she's just like, do it. And then she barges in and she's like, this is a great idea. The song comes out in May, perfect timing for Pride. And if we manage this well, it'll be a huge success. Like, she's like right away manager mode. Like, yeah, we got to do this. This is going to be great. So a while later, like it just like kind of cuts and it's a while later and they're at this taping of a live hip hop show. So I think it's kind of like a, what's his name? Arsenio Hall meets the Breakfast Club type of deal.
Okay.
Right. And so it's this guy, his name is Smooth. Smooth is the host. And Darnell's in the green room with Suzanne and he's really nervous because Slim is late. And like, they're going to come out together on national TV and promo their new song. So the interview is going really well. And Smooth is like, Darnell, it's great that you work. Oh, because like, there's some back history here that Darnell works with a lot of women in hip hop because he feels very comfortable working with them and they feel comfortable working with him. Right. And so off camera, Smooth and Darnell are talking about him working with women. And he's like, when we come back from break, you should talk about that because it's really interesting. So they go to commercial break. And now the plan is that when they come back from commercial break, this is when Slim is going to say the big statement. And then Darnell is. Because, again, Slim's the bigger name.
Yeah.
So he has to be the one to make the big statement.
And the thing is, they're not dating.
No.
They're just both separately.
We're just separately gay.
Instantly, knowing 2010, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Just solely because people are going to be like, oh, well, then they both came out together because they're together.
Yeah.
And that's just the feeling I immediately get.
So they come back from the commercial break, and Slim is acting real weird.
Yeah.
He's sweaty. He's being weird. He's all over the place. And after he's like, he goes to the bathroom. I forgot this. He like gets up. He's like, I had to go pee real quick. And he comes back, And the guy Smooth is like, Darnell, tell us about working with women in hip hop. And he's like, yeah, they feel a lot safer with me and I feel safe with them and blah, blah. And Slim is like, yeah, that's why I got to work with him too, because he has a great point of view, a different point of view. And that's why it's important. I think it's so important that I hired a gay person, because straight people like me and gay people got to work together. And that's what I'm trying to promote. And so he basically outs him. It's not basically, he does. He outs him.
He outs him.
And he makes it so that like Slim is this good guy for helping this gay person out.
Yeah, this feels like that Macklemore song.
Yeah. And so Darnell has really no choice but to kind of go along with it and smile and be polite.
Yeah.
But as soon as the camera cuts, he freaks out. And he's like, I can't believe you fucking did this, you fucking coward. You just outed me on national television, blah, blah, blah. And he calls him a queen in front of Smooth. He basically calls him out as being gay.
Yeah.
In front of Smooth and the whole TV crew and the audience and all that shit. Blah, blah. But then like scene cut, end of chapter.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And now Harriet Tubman's holding a gun to his head in a dilapidated church where she was born a slave.
Yes.
Okay.
Cut back to that scene.
All right.
Do you want to be free? Harriet asks him.
Bob, you are... Okay. Bob the drag queen is currently stitching metaphors inside my mind palace.
Inside your mind palace.
My mind mansion is opened with the stories and the literature of Bob the drag queen. Continue.
Okay. So the gun's still pointed at him, and she's basically like, we're taking this journey together.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with you. Darnell tells her and everyone that like he's a very private person and he doesn't feel safe sharing parts of himself. And they basically all call bullshit on him. And he basically just like gets so upset. He's like, you know what? I'm gay and I just get upset sometimes and blah, blah. And they're all kind of like, yeah. And then Harriet's like, wait, is that the big secret? We all knew that. And then somebody, I didn't write down, I feel like it's Moses, but he's like, my blind dead grandma knew that. Like everybody's just like, duh.
Yeah.
But he gets upset, then he storms out. And when he's outside, he talks to Moses, who explains to him that he isn't more different than them and that queer people existed back in their time as well. But it's not in history books because it was so dangerous to live that way that it wasn't written about because it was actually just too dangerous to write about.
And they were very good friends.
And they were very good. They were
roommates.
And roommates.
Yeah.
So Moses tells Darnell the story of a guy that he knew of named William Dorsey Swan, and who was a out and open homosexual and drag queen, right? And so he tells him this great story. And then this is the thing, is like, as I'm reading this book, I'm like, our author is only referencing real people every time. And so I'm like, who is this William Dorsey Swan? This is a real person. So I went to the Wikipedia page. I just pulled a quick quote so I can tell you, because the story gets described by Moses, but the wiki page also is just like, wait. During the 1880s and 1890s, Swan organized a series of drag balls in Washington, D.C. He called himself the Queen of Drag. Most of the attendees of Swan's gatherings were men who were formerly enslaved who gathered to dance in their satin and silk dresses. This group, consisting of former slaves and rebel drag queens, was known as the House of Swan. Because these events were so secretive, invitations were often quietly made at places like the YMCA. Swan participated in dances that were called cakewalks, a dance performed by enslaved people in America mimicking the mannerisms of plantation owners. The cakewalks' improvisational movements and subtle expressions of communication were an inspiration for the source of voguing and the style popularized in Harlem's ball scene.
That's so crazy.
This is a real person.
Yeah.
And this person, William Dorsey Swan, was born into slavery.
Yeah.
And when he became free, he moved to D.C. and started living openly and queer. And he was arrested multiple times.
Yeah.
Went to jail all the time for this.
Yeah.
But just kept doing it. Loved it.
It's
great.
so...
I never heard of this. I was like, what the hell? This is so incredible.
Yeah.
I wish I could do a whole episode on it, but really, the book nails it.
Yeah.
So we're back in the car on the road again, and there's a tense silence, and Darnell apologizes to everyone, and they decide that Darnell's going to take a couple days off to relax. recalibrate
process.
But he does that thing where most people do. He just ends up working on music.
Yeah.
And he spends the whole time making beats and writing songs. And while he's doing it, he thinks about how he hasn't been this inspired in a long time, not since he was working with Slim. And he does that thing where when you think about somebody, you start to look them up. And so he decides to look up Slim on Instagram and to see what he's been up to. And Slim has started his own record company, and he got married to a man. And then there's a picture of him on his Instagram feed of Slim with Harriet Tubman, because he is the person that signed the deal for the album to his record label.
Well,
bum, bum, bum.
Dun, dun, dun.
So the next day, after he processes all this information, he goes back to the studio, and everyone's standing around, and he assumes that Harriet is telling a story, but he immediately recognizes the voice, and it's Slim. And Slim is kind of holding court in the studio and walks over to Darnell when he comes up to him and is like, oh, long time no see, like, how are you, blah, blah. And right away, Darnell's like, whatever. Like, he's not playing into this at all. And Slim is like, do you want to go talk somewhere alone? And Darnell is like, if you have something to say to me, you can say it in front of all of them. And I need you to know that everyone is sat. So, like, as soon as Darnell looks at Slim and is like, oh, whatever, Odessa sits down, hands crossed. Moses is in the corner quiet. Like, if somebody had popcorn, there'd be popcorn. They immediately are like in it for the drama. And Slim is about to leave, but Darnell is like, Slim is about to leave, but Darnell's like, wait, I want you to hear this. And the scene cuts, and it's 30 minutes later, and Slim is leaving the studio, and Odessa, Moses, Quakes, and Buck agree that they all get bad vibes from Slim, but they also don't like him because of what he did to Darnell. And Darnell's like, what do you mean? How do you know about what he did to me? And they're all at the same time, they go, YouTube. We watched the video on YouTube. We saw what he did on YouTube.
It's so funny. It's so funny because, I was like, instantly, I was like, of course I knew about you. Cleopatra is on Instagram.
Yeah.
Would you please, characters? I'm so glad that Bob understands, right? Bob understands to create a universe when you're writing it, the technology that's going to exist and the rules of that universe, right? Yeah. But then Darnell is being like, no, you're all dumb. You're from 1850. And then they're like, we just went to YouTube.
We didn't know who you were, so we looked up your name on Google. A YouTube video came up with you on Smooth's podcast or whatever.
You were on 106 in Park. We all fucking know.
Yeah.
You were on 106 in Park.
We watched the video. Real fucked up thing he did.
Real fucked up. It was a really big...
Actually, there's a really funny joke in here. I didn't put it in my notes.
It's probably the third thing that shows up when they Google his name.
I need to tell you something. There's a really funny bit in this part of the scene. I didn't write it down, but I have to tell you now because we're talking about it. Is Darnell's like, well, what? Did it have like 1 million views? And Odessa's like 400,000. So, like, not only do they
For
know...
you, it was the biggest day in 106 in Park history.
But, like, even they understand the algorithm at this point.
Yeah.
So, like so good.
Like 400,000.
They end up writing
And it's 15 years old. That's the part that's crazy. It's a 15-year-old video of 400,000. Do not look at the view count of this video.
We're up and coming. We're up and comers.
Yeah, we're growing.
Yeah,
not showing. And this is a special edition story report. Too many tabs. Wednesday drop.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We know.
You stop it.
Stop it.
So they write a song called...
Instead, you go over to Apple. You go to the Apple Podcast, and you write a nice 5-star, nice.
Write a nice review.
Same thing on Spotify.
It's a Comedy History Podcast. You love us. We're the best. So they write a song after this conversation called "Whatever You Do, Keep Going," and it's about your responsibility to future generations. Because again, they keep talking to Darnell about how it's not about him; it's about what you do and how it affects the next generation. So like, they're like, we don't know, your motivations for this album don't really matter. Where the motivation is to provide freedom to the next generation, right? And so Harriet and Darnell discuss her motivations behind the album and how she wants to tell her story because unlike back in the day where she would tell it in tents and church gathering halls, she could put on the internet.
Yeah.
And then get in front of millions of people.
Yeah.
Right? So they're writing songs. Everyone's super talented. Harriet is so amazing. She does pass out cold sometimes. Darnell is flying high, trying to plan the big show, the tour aspects. He gets burned out. He's doing too much. And he gets hit with a bit of writer's block. And so he's in the studio one day with a blank page in front of him on his laptop, got the Google Doc open probably, and he's not doing anything. And DJ Quake shows up and is like, "Hey, what are you doing, bud? What are you doing?" And he's like, honest, and he's like, "I'm dealing with some writer's block." And Quake pulls a chair up next to him. There's a hop up on it with his cane, and pulls out a fat blunt. Smokes the roll. I love he's so little. Idea. And he tells him, he's like, I want to help you be inspired, right? We're gonna smoke, we're gonna get inspired, we're gonna talk. And Quakes is like, I used to inspire white people to have empathy.
That's what Benjamin Lay says to Darnell. Yeah.
So he's like, he says how he used to go to slavers and tell them how awful it must be for black people to have their children stolen and sold, and how painful it'd be to rip from their homes was, and how white people had to convince themselves that black people weren't fully human so they could disassociate from the abuse they were committing. Well, one day he's talking to this slaver who was not very open to the idea of empathy to enslaved people. So Quakes kidnapped that guy's daughter and took him back to the cave with his wife and held the child for 2 days. Child was safe, taken care of. And then returned the child and then went to go called upon the slaver at a later date. And the slaver was much more empathetic to the plight of enslaved people having their children taken from them.
Dude rules. That's true and that's real. I know for a fact that's true and that's real. That dude rules.
And then Quakes also tells him about the story about how he would, it's a very long story and it's so good. And you did already sort of cover it, about how he would go into the meeting house and call all the other Quakers out on their bullshit for owning humans and abusing them and exploiting them. And one day he got the idea to fill up a bag with berry juice and stab a Bible after calling them all out, and that's when he got kicked out of the meeting house.
Yeah, because it looks like the Bible was bleeding.
It looks like the Bible was bleeding.
He hollowed out the middle and put the bag of berry juice in the middle. Yeah. There is another Quaker, because there's quite a few famous...
Quakers in caves. Quakers in caves.
Okay, well, this one wasn't in a cave, but there was another Quaker that was a famous abolitionist, and his way... So this guy, Benjamin Lay, a little bit more on the militant side, the more famous. I can't remember what this other guy's name was, but he did something that only a Pennsylvania Quaker could.
What's that?
He passive-aggressively fought slavery.
Oh,
and you know how he did that? He would go to slavers' houses and have a meal with them. Mm-hmm. And then when it was done, he would offer to pay the slaves. And it would drive. He was like, no. They gave me a service.
Yeah.
They provided me food. I need to pay them so I can be a good Christian. And it was like this whole thing. And he just like, it drove them nuts.
Yeah.
Because he was so passively, aggressively being nice.
Yeah.
And like asking their names and just treating them like people. And it was enough to break down the facade of of the denial that they were having.
Yeah.
And it's just so crazy.
Here's the story about the Berry Bible. And then Harriet comes over to check on him because he can see that Darnell is doing nothing. Like, he's just sitting in front of a blank laptop. And she suggests that maybe he should take a break. And, like, she's like, I can tell you're worn out. You look like you're overworked, blah, blah. And he says, yeah, I've been slaving away at this. And as soon as he says it, he can feel all the air leave the room. Every eyeball is on him. Yeah. And Harriet reads him for filth. It's like, she is just like, you have never known a day of slavery in your life. How dare you say that, basically. And she reads him for filth, but she also tells him to keep his head up at the end of it. And after she walks away, Moses comes over to somewhat comfort him, but not much. But this verbal slap in the face really ignited his brain, and he feels inspired again. He also decides that he's going to have DJ Quakes help him plan the show because clearly he has a flair for the dramatics.
Yeah.
So they finish the album, right? Odessa has written a song too, and they're finishing up in the studio. And on the last day, Slim comes in. And he's listening and he's clapping. He's like, guys, you did a great job. Hey, Darnell, can I talk to you in the hall real quick? So he takes him to the outside, and he's like, listen, Darnell, I need a favor. And Darnell immediately is like, clocks it. He's like, not an apology, just a favor. And he's like, ever since we announced that you're the producer for this, album, that the YouTube video of us on Smooth Show is going viral again, and it's making me really look bad. So I was thinking we could go on the show again, and we can clear the air, blah, 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 and like that'll rehab my, my image right now. And Darnell refuses to help him clean up his mess.
Yeah.
Because again, he never apologizes.
Yeah.
He's just like, no, help
Not
me.
even right then.
Not even then he didn't apologize.
Even in the moment where he's like, I look like a bad guy. It's like, yeah, well, apologize
You're a
to me.
bad guy.
He even opens the sentence by saying, apologize?
Nope, none of that. And so Darnell is like refuses and goes back to work. Yeah. Right? So DJ Quiggs plans an incredible show. There's a lot of moving sets, and the sets change from forest to the city, and because the sets are so dynamic, it gives the feeling of momentum. So you get that feeling of being on the run, right? And the actor, the person who's playing John Brown is an actor. However, Frederick Douglass is being played by himself. Frederick Douglass is in the show.
Oh, hey!
The show is on Juneteenth at the Apollo.
Okay.
And Harriet has demanded it be free so that the most people possible can see it. However,
that will start a riot.
Nope. Dr. Slim, he, because he's the owner of the thing, he got a bunch of brand deals to live stream the event with Amazon, Nike, and Starbucks as sponsors. So the Apollo is sold out. And also the celebrities, former presidents, singers, everybody's trying to get in this audience. So there's a lot of people there. While backstage, this is the night of the big show, by the way. Night of the big show. Backstage, Darnell's talking to Harriet. Everybody's so excited and nervous, blah, blah. And they're all just like getting ready. Like Odessa's putting on makeup. Moses is like meditating, like the whole thing. Everybody's just getting ready for their big fucking show at the Apollo on Juneteenth. And Darnell goes up to Harriet and he's like, listen, I got big ideas for the next show. He's like disco, right? Like he's like disco. I don't know. He's got big ideas, right? And she looks at him and she gives him like a slight smile. And she's like, listen, I have walked many people to freedom, and eventually our route together must come to an end. This is your drop-off. You were strong. You made this journey to freedom of your own volition, but this is where our journey comes to an end so that you can grow bigger, stronger, and be more free.
Love that.
And everyone circles around Darnell while he cries, and Harriet hugs him. And in the background, an announcer voices boom. Ladies and gentlemen, Harriet Tubman and the Freemans present Queen of the Underground. And that's the end of the book.
That's the end of the book?
Yeah.
To get Mary Poppins by Harriet Tubman.
Okay, so now there's one thing. Here's what I found out. Wait, real quick, before you say anything else. I purchased this book multiple times. So I bought the hard copy. And I also bought the Kindle because having a toddler, sometimes it's a lot easier to read with a Kindle because he's not trying to tear pages. And also, I had heard through a little birdie that if you listen to the audiobook, which Bob recorded himself, theirselves, and he sings the songs that are in this book. And so when you get to the very last page of this book, where it says the announcement comes live, and then the actual album is written out at the end of the book, right?
Really?
So you see all the lyrics and the back and forth of songs, the whole thing. So what I did is I got Queen of the Underground, the opening song, in front of me, and I want to play it for you. And then we'll come back and you'll react and tell us all what you think of the song.
Yeah, because we can't play it or else
Bob can copyright us. I love that for
Bob.
you, Bob.
Bob could, but it also
we don't want. I want to respect his work, so he gets all of his money.
Yes, and then people can go stream it as well.
Exactly.
Whenever they want to hear it. So all right,
and this is off Spotify because I found it on Spotify.
We got Spotify. It's probably on Apple Music. It's probably on a bunch
and then
of
we'll
other
come
places.
back. We're gonna close out. And you're gonna tell me all your thoughts on this amazing book.
Yes, right after this. Well, you just played Queen of the Underground for me.
Absolutely.
It's so good.
I downloaded it.
It's Queen of the Underground by Bob the Drag Queen.
On Spotify.
On Spotify or on Apple Music or wherever.
Yeah.
Probably on
wherever
YouTube.
You find music.
Wherever you find music. The part about punching a baby in the head. Allegations. Because there was a while, which is actually a TikTok trend.
Yeah.
It was like TikTok and Twitter and stuff like that for a while where people were talking about Harriet Tubman would knock out babies.
Well, they can't cry.
Yeah, exactly. And as Bob mentions, as Harriet gave him a little yak, because they should drug the babies. But people read Knocked Out and just pictured Harriet Tubman punching babies in the head. The song is great.
It's so good.
By the end of it, I wanted to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I wanted to hop right on an elliptical.
Yeah.
I wanted to start moving. It also made me realize there was a thing in, I want to say around 2008, 2010. There was a thing where there were white Southern singers who would do songs like Wade in the Water and others, and they would take these old spirituals and like jazz them up a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like make them more radio ready type of shit, commercialize them. And so like when the song opened with Wade in the Water, and I was thinking back to how you were explaining you wade in the water so the dogs can't follow your tracks.
Yeah.
And those different things. And I'm like listening to it, I'm like, oh, that was disrespectful with those singers.
Yeah.
It's just one of those moments where I'm like, you put a lot into context for me, Bob.
Yeah.
Incredible song, incredible book.
Yeah.
You
love this book?
I love this book.
I
Final
love this book
Thoughts.
so much. It was so amazing. It's so fun to read.
Yeah.
And it's one of those ones where I'm always like, you don't have to read the book because technically if you listen to the story report, we went over the whole book. But if you take the time to read this book, it's not a lot of time. It's a pretty short book.
Yeah.
It's so good. And like
I'm very
even us two little history buffs, I
Yeah.
was finding stuff that I didn't know.
I
in
am
there.
I am very interested because I feel like this is going to be one of those ones. It's gotten so many good reviews.
Yeah.
It's going to be picked up.
Yeah.
It's going to there will do something will be made with this.
Dear Bob the Drag Queen, Promania 500 can grow his beard longer. Would you like to play John Brown?
Down to my nipples.
Down his nipples.
Down to my nipples, I can grow this beard.
I think he's
and
like-
we can dye it.
We can dye it different
We
colors.
can dye it.
Please let
We
him
can
be
dye
John
my
Brown.
hair into a different color, and then we can soak it in the blood of the slave owners.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
There's a great sin that must be purged from this nation.
Harper's Ferry.
I
tour
don't know.
guide.
I made him Southern. He wasn't.
Yeah, he wasn't.
There's a great sin that needs to be purged from this nation. That's probably more of it.
That's probably
He
something
was more a
like-
New England guy. Or I could just be a guy.
Just be a guy.
Basically, Bob, I just want to be your friend. No, I.
This
I,
whole
we,
episode
we
is a
have been,
pitch.
listen, we have been ever since you first explained, you got super into RuPaul's Drag Race years and years and years ago.
Yeah, before
and
I
then
met you.
one day you were like, oh yeah, I love Bob the Drag Queen. I was like, that's such a crazy name for a drag queen. And then they started performing at clubs in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why is this drag queen doing stand-up? And you're like, drag queens are funny. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then, because a lot of drag queens, I get upset sometimes. A lot of them do what's called street jokes.
Yeah.
Where they're taking older jokes and they might rework them a little bit for the time, but it's really like your classic
Yeah.
setup punchline, very old school, almost vaudeville jokes. Bob is a stand-up.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Bob is an MC, work with Madonna, all these different things. And so everything that Bob does is just so fucking impressive, and especially this book. I think the end of Harriet Tubman literally, as I say, Mary Poppinsing
Yeah.
away, which is something that people, listen, anybody who's ever been there for somebody and realized you need to leave in that moment,
Yeah.
because they're going to believe that all of the strength and power and humility that they needed to get to that moment, they don't think came from themselves, but they start to believe came from you instead.
Mm-hmm.
That's how both of you can get stuck. And so Harriet Tubman at the end being like, no, you're free now.
Yeah.
You found who you are. You've confronted your past. You've seen those different things, while at the same exact time showing that difference. I think the other thing that really comes through is that there is a thing that often happens between generations when you have one that has to strive for, whether it be freedom, whether it be equality, whether it be just financial means, food, any of those things, that a later generation will look back and feel less than,
Yeah.
because they didn't have to go through these struggles. More so, I feel sometimes, than the older generation looks down on the younger. Because the reason why, people fight for rights and go to war and on a thought process is so the world will be better for their children.
Yeah.
And so why would I struggle and do all these different things, with the idea of Moses? I'm going to get to the promised land. Moses doesn't see it.
Yeah.
You know, in Harriet's case, for many of these people, she's trying to get them out.
It's like that thing. It's like a good person plants a tree but they'll never see the shade.
Yeah,
they'll never sit in the shade or something.
A person plants a tree today, so their children will sit in the shade in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's that same general idea. And there's a lot of that came through in this one.
Yeah. And
of where that is, but also from the Darnell's perspective of like how he feels like kind of bad the entire time. Like he's looking at these people and like realizing the privilege he has compared to them, and like the feeling, that moment when Odessa turns to Darnell and it's like, you know, what's it like to have freedom your entire life, and realize like, oh, like it's like that moment when you're staring at the Netflix menu bitching that there's nothing to watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it is freedom, and it's kind of in this way that's almost it's almost paralyzing. Yeah. But I think the book is incredibly funny. Yeah. And obviously, I think it's incredibly educational and well thought out. Yeah. I think it is. It's a party in my mind mansion.
You really opened up some things in Alex's mind.
You really did.
Yeah.
You really did. It makes me even madder that Harriet's not on the 20 and that fucking racist genocidal monster Andrew Jackson is still there.
Yeah.
You know.
So we're mad again. We gotta stay mad. You gotta get things done. You gotta stay mad.
Here's the thing you need to understand. I'm always mad.
Me too.
But I think that this was an incredible good, a good story report.
A good story report.
And I want to say that not only I think that Bob wrote a love letter to Harriet Tubman, and you just did a love letter to Bob. And to everyone out there, go check out this book. Go on Libby. Libby. One of the reasons you were starting to talk about, but you forgot to mention, the reason why you ended up buying on Kindle is because the wait time for it on Libby was so long.
It was 57 weeks.
Yeah, and we weren't going to wait.
I said I have to do this now.
Yeah, so
I did buy it twice.
Yeah, so go to your library, get it wherever you want to get it.
I'm trying to help keep it on the bestsellers list.
Yeah.
You know what? If you don't have the funds to buy this book right now, get it on the wait list in Libby, right? Mm-hmm. If your library doesn't have it, go to your library's website and request that they purchase the book. That's what you have to do. You have to ask them to purchase the hard copy book or the Libby book, and that way you can read it at the beach this summer. You can read it at a lake house that you invite me to, so I can be a lake person.
You want to be a lake person so bad.
Reading books. You
can be a bay person on the Chesapeake Bay. Ugh. No, I'm kidding. But with that, thank you guys so much for...
Thank you so much for listening to Story Report. It's my favorite episodes, and I appreciate everyone. Yeah. Support your local library. Join the library board.
Get your library
card. Donate to the libraries. Do everything you can. We have to save them.
Yeah, we have to save them, especially because their funds are being cut at a rate that is crazy. So thank you guys so much. Thank you to everyone. And please, check out Harriet Tubman Live in Concert, a novel by Bob the Drag Queen.
Too many frauds and too many scammers that we wish weren't real. Too many cons and too many spammers, and we're starting to feel like we've got too many tabs open. It's too many tabs. Remember to smile.